from the city of St. Louis, you're listening to the Don't Push Pause podcast with your hosts, Justin Johnson and Lindsay Reber.
Welcome again to the podcast.
Hi, Justin.
Hey, Lindsay.
Happy to be back for this one.
Yeah.
I mean, all of them, but
right.
Extra
I'm
special.
just happy to be back.
Happy to be back. Happy to be alive.
Yeah. This is kind of special. We're doing the movie that we've talked about a numerous amount of times on this podcast, The Monster Squad.
Finally.
I would say the movie that sparked our mutual interest in films, like our connection, if you
brought
will.
us together.
Yeah, and so I'm glad. And it seemed like a movie that we didn't want to start out doing, because it's one of those ones. It's like, you know it or you don't know it. There's no real in between. But we especially wanted to do it now because we had a great opportunity, which I'm very thankful this podcast allowed for this opportunity. But we were able to interview the main actor who plays Sean, Andre Gower, and his producing partner, Henry McComas, because they actually did a feature-length documentary called Wolfman's Got Nards, which is doing the film festival run right now. So they were kind enough to do an interview with us, and we will play that interview for you a week from now. Mm-hmm. We want to do the Monster Squad episode, and then a week from now we'll release our interview that we did with those guys.
Give you some information. If you don't know the movie, tell you about it, and if you do, kind of get you jazzed to learn a lot of information maybe you didn't know about it.
And I learned a lot. They were kind enough to give us a screener, so we were able to actually pull from that documentary some information to help us.
Oh, I'm so thankful for that.
Yeah,
the documentary Wolfman's Got Nards was so great, and admittedly, I might have watched it more than 3 times. Yeah.
Well, we'll talk a little bit about that at the end here. But for Monster Squad, again, this is a favorite of ours. This falls into the what I consistently love, what you call the horror light category. It falls into that hybrid genre category, mixing scares with fun, with humor, coming of age story. To me, this movie was always side by side, hand in hand with Stand By Me when I was growing up.
Yeah.
This was more of Stand By Me was like, I think, a more emotional movie for me, and Monster Squad was more of a reflection on who I was at the time of being into horror movies, being into monsters, being a little bit of an outcast at my school, and I was really dialed into these kids. They felt very real to me growing up.
Along the same lines, I would say Monster Squad was responsible for me wanting to start a club when I was a kid. I think mine was more like wanting to start like a X-Files club, but it was like a fake FBI club or something like that. But you know, kids with the same interest, kind of sparked that for me as a youngster. And also comparing it to Stand By Me, I was... Even as a kid, I was somewhat resentful anytime someone would say, oh yeah, that's like, Monster Squad's like the Goonies, but like with monsters, right? And I'm like, no, it's not actually. But that comparison has been made, and I feel like they are very different, but that comparison has been made before.
And weirdly enough, I've never been a fan of Goonies. Even as a kid,
you just got so many claps from people that love the Monster Squad.
I've just never been a fan of Goonies. I mean, and I've watched it probably multiple times as a kid, and I haven't. It's definitely a movie that I've seen in the last 10 years to kind of when you always got to make sure like, and I watched it, it did nothing for me. But no offense to people that love the Goonies, because I know it's a.
My challenge is, you know what, you say you like the Goonies, try the Monster Squad. I guarantee you haven't seen it then, because you would love it more, in my humble opinion.
So for Monster Squad, what are we talking about? We've got a few things on
Yeah.
our list here.
Well, we're definitely going to hit on the fact that it's a hybrid genre movie, and also talk about Fred Dekker, what this movie did for his career.
Fred Dekker, the director of Monster Squad.
I'm sorry, yes.
No, sorry.
Fred, he's just like my buddy.
No, I know.
Fred Dekker,
For those in the
Thank you, Justin.
Yeah, no problem.
The cast, the special effects, will probably hit on that, and really what makes this movie so special for the time that it came out.
Yeah, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about the sort of, I guess you would call it the legacy of the Monster Squad. Yeah. Its growing cult fan base, and kind of tie that in when we talk about the documentary coming out.
Yeah.
So outside of Monster Squad, we've got our picks of the week. Mine was House, which was a movie based off of a story that Fred Dekker wrote, and you did his debut feature,
Night of the Creeps.
Yeah, which is a really great movie.
And I love House too.
Yeah, House was nice. It'd been a while since I'd seen it, but it's and it kind of, I think, plays in that same genre hybrid that we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll do our picks of the week, and then, as always, our Murray moments. So before we get into a Monster Squad clip, Lindsay, can you tell us what's a Monster Squad about? I know the title kind of gives a little bit away.
It's a squad of kids that fight monsters. Yes, basically that is it. Dracula, Frankenstein, Gillman, or the creature from the Black Lagoon, and the Mummy all descend upon this town.
What about the Wolfman?
The Wolfman. Jeez. I mean, all of them.
Jeez,
how could I forget the Wolfman? Jeez. All descend upon this town, and of course, it's up to a group of kids to take them down. The army can't do it. Police can't do it. You know who can? Any kids from the age of like 5 to 14 can take them down. It's a lot of fun. It is strangely these movies where we feel, and it was something that happened in the 80s where it just felt like kids could do anything, fight crime and whatnot. I buy it the whole time.
Yeah.
That they're gonna take down Dracula and his gang.
I like the level of sincerity with the fact that monsters exist. Like even in the beginning, when the principal is just like, well, monsters aren't real. And he's like, we don't know that, sir. It was like this
It was so Mulder, like just to be like, we don't know that, sir. Actually.
Yeah. But there's just like level of sincerity within the kids that I think gives this movie charm. So we'll go to a clip from Monster Squad of maybe one of their first meetups, and then we'll talk about how this movie came to be.
All right.
Second way to kill a vampire.
I give up. Daylight.
Sunlight. That kid, what other kind of light is there during the day?
Go away, Pete.
Okay, question 2. Is Frankenstein the name of the monster or the guy who made him?
The guy.
Right. Can't you read?
Mom says you have to let me in the club or else it's prescription.
That's discrimination, jerkoid. Prescription's drugs, which you're on if you think you're getting up here.
Come on, son, I know about one. Come on, let me in the
2 ways to kill a werewolf.
Silver bullet?
And?
That's it. Shoot him with the silver bullet.
Nope, sorry, Rudy.
Okay, so what's the other way?
What?
Second way to kill a werewolf.
Car crash? Accident with power tools? Old age? Falling out of a window? Onto a bomb?
Sean, Phoebe, dinner!
Oops, gotta go.
Wait.
So the Monster Squad, written and directed by Fred Dekker, but also co-written by Shane Black. And I want to talk about Shane Black for a minute because we were both huge fans of both Shane Black and Fred Dekker. But this is always interesting to me whenever when a group of people come together when they're young and talented and they go on to do individual things, but this is their starting point. And Fred Dekker had already made a name for himself with Night of the Creeps, wrote and directed Night of the Creeps, that came out a year before Monster Squad.
It wasn't like a big movie, but of the people that saw it, it got good recognition anyway.
Confidently and competently made film, genre film. Fred Dekker was friends with Shane Black, and so he asked him about working on the script that was the he said the Little Rascals meets the
Universal
Monsters. And so Shane Black started working on the script, and the reason I talk about Shane Black more is because he was one of the first, I guess, like screenwriters who was like a superstar. Like as soon as he wrote Monster Squad, he wrote Lethal Weapon, and Lethal Weapon became this just enormous, insanely enormous franchise.
Yeah, and it was something like, had the timing been like, had maybe like Monster Squad come out after Lethal Weapon or something like that, they could have kind of ridden on the coattails of that.
If you would have if they could have put on the poster from the writer of
Lethal Weapon, it probably would have been a whole different game.
Shane Black did that, went on to do Last Boy Scout, wrote, Last Action Hero, Long Kiss Goodnight, and then eventually became writer-director with Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, and then going on to direct
Iron Man
2.
Yeah, or 3.
I think it was part 2.
2, okay.
Yeah. But, just one of those writers that just became like a superstar, writing superstar. And actually, him and Fred Dekker are reteaming for the first time with a movie coming out in like a week or so here.
Yeah, The Predator.
The Predator. So we got to go see that.
Oh, we've already got a date to go see that.
And so Fred Dekker did not have such a catapulting like career. Unfortunately, Monster Squad wasn't really a huge hit, and then
commercial success.
Was a hit with the fans. And then he went on to do RoboCop 3, which was also not a commercial success. And that, it's like, it's got to be tough when you're young and in Hollywood. Like, you don't get as many chances if you're not like have one or two hits behind you.
And it seemed like too, coming off of Night of the Creeps, that yes, like wasn't a giant box office hit, but was, people appreciated it. That I think Fred Dekker said something like, you're never hotter than right before your movie comes out, right?
Yeah.
So like there had been some build up to Monster Squad, and it seemed like everything was kind of poised for this movie to do well.
Yeah.
And I think it was maybe not a shock, but I don't think anyone expected it to like not do that well, because there were just so many people that put their heart and soul into this, and it had taken quite a long time in order for this movie to actually get out there. I think the like story for Monster Squad existed, or there had been talk of it before even Night of the Creeps.
Yeah, and it bums me out because I think Fred Dekker is like such a talented, like an assured filmmaker, and has like a significant voice, in a particular style. And, I think he would have been up there with, be able to do movies. Like, I think Joe Dante is another example of someone like he was
you
a
love
film.
Joe Dante, don't you?
I do, but the thing is like, I think that had he not had Gremlins, he would have been somebody that, because as soon as he didn't have a hit or two, he was done. Like they were like, you can't make movies anymore with a budget. But because Gremlins and Interspace were like kind of hits, he was able to make these other films, smaller films that were in line with his sensibilities. And I think Fred Dekker would have been the same, but unfortunately he never got that push, that hit of a film.
Yeah. He looks at it in some ways that Monster Squad was detrimental to his career, but he said that it's probably his greatest film at this point anyway.
And I think that's true. I really think this is a great film. And I think this is not just, there's certainly all these movies that we do for the podcast, I undeniably have some sort of nostalgic love attached to them. Of course, I'm not going to deny that. But at the same time, there are a lot of movies that I've had nostalgic love tied to that I've rewatched, and I'm like,
I know that
I'm not as into this movie, so I feel like I can differentiate a little bit. And this is a movie that I can watch time and time again, usually during the Halloween season. And I do think this is a movie if you're looking for a family-friendly Halloween film and you're just burnt out on watching Hocus Pocus with your kids for the umpteenth time, you can put in Monster Squad and watch Monster Squad with them, because I think this is a very family appropriate and really festive and fun movie to watch during the Halloween holidays. It's
funny you say that. I can rewatch this movie at any point, and I did earlier today. And there's a point during there's a amazing, one of my most favorite musical montages in a movie happens in Monster Squad, and it's kind of towards the end of that in the movie where it something within me, it made me feel like it was Halloween or just right around Halloween, and I like just had something happen where I was like, it's almost Halloween. Oh, it's not though, but it is. There's just something about it that you can watch it really at any time of the year, but I think it just because of it's so exciting and fun, it just has that spirit that happens right around the Halloween.
That's a good little montage too. And a good little song. I feel like that song,
Rock Until You Drop.
I feel like that song, if
by Michael Sambello.
But I feel like if like it's like one of those songs. It's like it has like it's very reminiscent of like a Kenny Loggins like movie type song. Like I'm shocked that it wasn't. I mean, I feel like if this movie was a hit, that would have been on the radio like all the time.
I mean, Rock Until You Drop, Dance Until Your Heart Stops, Party Till Your Brains Fall Out. I could go on.
You should.
I've already been singing on this podcast one time. I gotta hold it together.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about just this style like of this movie. We've mentioned this in other episodes. A hybrid genre where in the 80s particularly comedy was mixed with real scares.
Yeah.
Generally in a movie that's not super terrifying or like gross out horror. In this movie, I think Gremlins falls in that category. Gremlins 2, Fright Night, Evil Dead 2.
Even Lost Boys a little bit.
Lost Boys, House, I think is, and I think Fred Dekker with Night of the Creeps, I think with these two films, Night of the Creeps and Monster Squad, and being a writer of House, this was a genre that he really excelled at. I think it's hard to make a movie that's scary and at the same time has humor, and on top of it all, have a little bit of heart,
Yeah. It's not like it's a comedy first and then, has something it's not like it's Once Bitten that's like a comedic vampire movie. It's a relatively, frightening or scary or horror movie with funny little bits thrown in, and it is difficult to pull that off without coming off as cheesy. And I think like with something like Night of the Creeps, what happens is it really embodies the camp factor, which was intended, but again is sometimes really hard to pull off.
Like for me, I've always known Dracula before I saw Monster Squad.
Yeah.
But throughout my childhood, the real scary Dracula that I was familiar with was from this movie. I didn't have anything attached to like an old black and white scary vampire movie. So at the time, this Dracula was like the Dracula of my childhood that I found scary and that I remembered the most, that I associated vampires with.
That's one thing that we probably should, we already kind of said, universal monsters. And for anyone out there that doesn't know what we mean by that, we mean like Universal Studios original like monster movies, and that being like, Bela Lugosi as Dracula and like Lon Chaney as the Wolfman and
Boris Karloff's Frankenstein.
Yeah. And these were, yes, there was Nosferatu that existed before that, but these were part of
high budgeted, dream-like quality horror films.
Yeah. And which are all, man, those are the movies. I grew up on those movies. My mom had me watching those when I was young because they were also like safe, for kids to watch. They weren't kids movies at all, but so that's what we mean by universal monsters. All these classic, things that you can say, the Mummy or Frankenstein, and you know what we're talking about.
And they sort of set the standard for that, in pop culture, and just like these are the movies that kids of the 50s grew up on.
And it's why I feel like Monster Squad is extra special, because I don't feel like it's not ripping off anything, or it doesn't make it any less creative by taking these characters that existed before. Like, we all know who these characters are, but we're putting them in a completely different story and setting, and having a whole unique story by itself.
Yeah. When I think that's what I like about the Monster Squad too, is it's referencing this universe that we all know, which is, we're all familiar with these monsters from the Universal monster movies.
Yeah.
We're familiar with, we are from in the Monster Squad, those movies exist. And I think that's really endearing. I think that's what makes this movie so much fun, is it plays on a lot of what we know of growing up, what we know of monsters, but then has its own original aspects and puts its own spin on these monsters, and actually makes them more frightening than I think the original Universal monster movies are.
And I think that's where the whole genre blending kind of adds a whole another layer, really, as we have these original monster movies, and then we mix that a little bit with this idea of the little rascals, meet these Universal monsters, and then we bring it into the late 80s, where kid-centered movies were a thing. And really, I think Monster Squad kind of helped catapult that idea in the 80s, and helped solidify that, like I was saying before, that kids could do anything. They could solve crime, and they could fight monsters. But with this one, it is blending so many different things together that it creates this world that I can't think of another movie like it during the time.
I'm glad, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but glad to know and hear that quite a large audience has embraced this film and banded together, and this is a movie that's, would fall into that, what I would consider a cult classic,
So you would consider it a cult movie?
I do consider it a cult classic.
Too.
I do too. I think a movie that has a very strong following, where it's people are like, this is one of my favorite movies, kind of thing, but then there's the majority of the world is like, I never heard of that movie. That to me falls into that category.
And there are plenty of movies that I can think of that no one, or I feel like 5 people have heard of, that could be considered so obscure that they're cult movies. But the thing about it is that there's really not a following behind them, because there's something that makes it, there's a reason this movie didn't do so well.
Yeah.
But with Monster Squad, it is the fact that its popularity has only gotten larger throughout time, I think says a lot about its longevity and ability to sustain itself.
Yeah. Well, we'll go to another clip, and then we'll come back. We'll talk a little bit about the cast. We'll talk a little bit about the creature effects, and then we'll move on to our picks of the week, which are very heavy in Fred Dekker realm filmography.
Man, I guess I just really love Fred Dekker.
I
really
do too. He's a great filmmaker.
Now look, I'm the leader of this squad, so listen up. You said Dracula knows we're here, so let's just try to find the amulet. And get the hell out of here. Kick him in the Nards! Kick him in the Nards! He doesn't have Nards! Do it! Do it! Wolfman's got Nards! Come on! Come on!
So, I was talking about cast when we do these episodes.
Yeah.
So this was a movie that didn't really have a lot of familiar names, but it was a movie that I think is always wise in movies where they have some newcomers for kids, and then some actors who are veterans, like familiar faces, not necessarily household names, but newcomers, Andre Gower and Ryan Lambert, who both, I think, put in really endearing performances in this movie.
Yeah.
I really, just this idea of like a club, is something that I think when we're all kids, we kind of have our make-believe club or our, like, your band of friends. You're always pretending to be, you're mimicking, a TV show that you like or whatever, you're using your imagination. And I think that's where this movie's strengths are. It was in these kids' imaginations and this like bond, this friendship that they form. And I think that the acting in this is, it's really suits the movie well. These feel like they could be your friends.
Yeah. I feel like Andre Gower's portrayal of Sean was very confident and likable, like just a solid lead character. And ironically, he wanted the part of Rudy that Ryan Lambert got. It feels like where the chips fell, it was kind of meant to be that way. Ryan Lambert really pulls off the character of Rudy effortlessly. And it was either before or during, but those two, I believe, were kind of, teen idol, teen beat heartthrobs around that time. The whole group, really, we've got Patrick, who was Robbie Kiger, might be pronouncing that incorrectly, but Patrick was a good oddball character that was kind of thrown in there. And Phoebe, the little girl, honestly, like, I identified with Phoebe. I was Phoebe at that age. I think that that's one of the reasons I fixated so much on this movie growing up, was because, my brother had his group of friends that were all part of, like, a bicycle gang, and like went on adventures together, and they had treasure maps and like would swing out on vines in the woods and do all of this stuff. And they're 8 years older than I am, and I'm like the kid sister. And to me, Monster Squad was my childhood. So Phoebe, I think for me, really fit into that group, even though she was very young in comparison to everybody else. And even, we can't forget Eugene, and especially Horace. Brent Chalem, R.I.P.
Yeah, Horace is definitely a character that I think a lot of people, I think probably I identified with most was Horace, just like being like sort of like more of the outcast kid that doesn't fit in, but is, there to help out and support the group.
I feel like I wanted to, in my head, maybe I wanted to be the Sean character, but in reality, in my middle school days, I was most definitely treated like the Horace character, picked on, outsider type of thing. But it's one of the things that just one character brings to this group, and I think part of the overall picture, why each one of these characters brings something special that makes anyone watching this movie, especially if you feel like an outsider, able to identify with it.
So I think, like, outside of the cast, the other big thing to love about the Monster Squad itself is the monsters.
Yeah.
The Monster Squad effects, I think, are really great. And I think originally the idea was to model them identical to the Universal monsters, but then there was some sort of
Copyright. Universal didn't want to have anything to do with it.
Yeah, so they said that there can be a likeness, but it can't be identical. So they made an effort to make them similar to the Universal monsters, but have their own individual identities, which in a lot of ways I think is better, because I love the way the creatures look. And it was a team of a lot of young people made up the special effects crew, but they were headed up by Stan Winston, who shot to fame by doing the effects for the Terminator and creating the Alien and Aliens, working with James Cameron, and then also doing the Predator monster. So that was a pretty big deal to get, I think, for
to get him involved.
To get him involved. And from what I understand, he kind of turned a lot of it over to the young people on the crew, like, here's what we're going to do. And they broke up into teams, and each team took on a different monster. To me, the monsters in this are really scary. The practical effects still work really well. This isn't a movie that I go back and watch and like, man,
You
this
feel like
look-
something's dated.
Yeah. I mean, stuff still looks really, really good, even when the Wolfman, all his body parts come
I think
together.
that looks
And
so
the transformation scene, I think, is as good as
Yeah.
a transformation scene that we've seen in The Howling or American Werewolf in London.
They do, specifically with the werewolf, they do, or Fred Dekker does a lot of, he uses the shot in order to, change. Maybe we pass by and the screen goes black for 1 second, but it is looks like one continuous shot. But also at the same time, the practical effects really work. That's one thing I love about practical effects when done well, is that it makes it so much more believable.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna completely buy that over any type of CGI.
Yeah, and I
hands
think
down.
that the end battle sequence in this is fantastic. It's still very exciting, very thrilling. I have to say this again, back to the Wolfman. I
Yeah.
love that Wolfman's on standing on 2 feet,
Yeah.
kind of like the old school original werewolf.
Yeah.
Not like on all fours, like looking more animal than man.
Yeah, you gotta love the torn shirt type of thing. I love that.
Wanted to close out a little bit on, because and we'll talk more about the documentary Wolfman's Got Nards. I wanted to close out a little bit on sort of what the Monster Squad has become. Like, this was a movie that not a lot, and they talk about this in the Wolfman's Got Nards documentary. This was a movie that sort of lay dormant. I mean, I know I found it through a friend of mine had this taped on VHS, and I think a lot of people, this was one that was passed around. People saw it on cable.
About how old were you when you discovered it?
I guess I would have been about 11 years old.
Okay.
Probably maybe a year after it came out.
Okay.
But I feel like I read about it in the Teen Beat magazines. I'm sure I was reading that kind of crap whenever I was 10, 11. But this never really had and I did end up buying, I remember buying the original VHS at the mall.
Oh, really?
At a Suncoast Video, if you remember those.
R.I.P. Yeah, I bought a lot of Suncoast Video.
And I probably paid an outrageous price for it too, I'm sure.
Definitely.
This was one where the sheer audience, the sheer fan base of this movie got a DVD release. People pledged to, pushed the studio to release this movie on DVD and then eventually Blu-ray. And enough people rallied together that they were able to get a special edition release of this movie, and for them to go back and restore it so it wouldn't get lost.
Yeah.
So you're able to watch a clean version of this, not a dubbed over. And there, don't get me wrong, there's something special about watching a dubbed over version, because that's how I remember most movies.
Sure. My
My memory is watching a very degraded version of whatever movie that, was my favorite at the time.
Before I bought that edition, DVD edition that you're talking about, the only copy I had of Monster Squad was taped from HBO, and I had watched it so much, and I have a lot of VHS, and I found that even if they are really old, if you haven't played it a lot, the audio's still going to be okay. The Monster Squad one, though, that audio, you can jack it all the way up and it's still difficult to hear. But, if you're like me and you've seen it a million times, it's fine. It doesn't even matter if it's quiet.
And I was very, I'm not saying this in any kind of bragging way, but I was feel very fortunate.
You can totally say it.
I feel very fortunate that when they did it was almost the 20th anniversary of this movie. It was before they did the 20th anniversary DVD, I was living in Austin. The Alamo Draft House put together a 2-night. They screened a 35 millimeter print of the Monster Squad, and they had the whole cast and crew there. Fred Dekker was there, and so me and my sister-in-law went to this because we both were huge fans of the Monster Squad, and it was just one of the most energetic screenings I've ever been to. The energy in the room was incredible, and it was just watching the movie with a crowd was one of the funnest things ever.
And they kind of didn't realize until they were asked, that being the cast and Fred Dekker really didn't realize what kind of a following that the movie had up until the showing. So that's kind of a huge deal, and it was that showing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it was that showing that it really Fred Dekker.
The ball rolling.
Yeah, Fred Dekker's like, if you want a DVD of this, write letters, tell people that you want it.
Got the ball rolling for, and then since then there's been screenings of the Monster Squad all over the country.
That's so crazy. It makes me really happy for them. I mean, if anything, like, even though who knows what could have happened, for everyone involved with this movie had it blown up when it should have blown up. But the fact that it's years later, and 30 years later, and it's blown up, it almost, I wonder if in a way it's actually better for everybody that's involved that it is, or makes it even a little bit more special that it's blown up the way that it has now. I don't know. There's no way to know that, but I like to think that it's even better for everybody involved now.
Yeah. Well, if you're a listener out there who is unfamiliar with this movie that we've been talking about, or you're semi-familiar but you've never seen it, this is one I really urge you to check out. And again, there's not a lot of movies that I can recommend to kids. Most of the movies that we've done on this podcast, I think, are rated R, actually, now that I think about it.
Yeah.
But this one, I think, is very kid-oriented, works both for adults and kids. I think it's one that, and again, it's another one to watch during the holidays. Yeah.
Any holiday. Watch it during 4th of July. It's great.
So we'll go on to our picks of the week, keeping it in the Fred Dekker.
Justin, I could really talk about Monster Squad for hours.
I know you could.
I feel like
I could too, but we need to.
Okay.
We're getting.
I know we got it. We got to keep trucking. Picks of the week. Do you want to kick this one off?
I'll kick this one off.
Yeah.
So my pick of the week is the movie House. It came out in 1985. The story is credited to Fred Dekker, and it was directed by Steve Miner, who started out working in the Friday 13th franchise. He directed Part 2 and Part 3, eventually went on to direct Halloween H2O. So he was no stranger to the horror genre, and it was produced by Sean S. Cunningham, who was the original director of Friday 13th. So we've got a lot of the horror genre in the house making this movie come together. And this is a strange little film. It's not a great movie by any means. I think almost it really rides a fine line in that hybrid of humor and horror. And sometimes I think the humor, or its attempts at humor, hurt the horror elements of this film. So it does it's pretty campy and cheesy, I'm not gonna lie. This movie isn't really scary at all. It rides high on camp, but it is a fun film. It revolves around a writer whose aunt has committed suicide in this house. And this writer's very troubled. He's coming off of a divorce. He's not doing really well in his life. His son's gone mysteriously missing. He's got some troubled past. Possibly he's got some post-traumatic stress syndrome from being in the Vietnam War, and he inherits his house from his aunt. So he goes to live in this house, soon realizing that there's some weird stuff going on in this house. Monsters, ghouls, ghosts, what have you. Possibly it's haunted by something from his past. I don't want to give any spoilers away. But him finding out about these weird monsters and stuff going on is kind of goofy. And there's a lot of humor brought on by his neighbor, played by George Wendt of Cheers fame. It also stars Richard Mole from Night Court fame. And then the main actor who...
Martin Mole? Is it Martin Mole?
No, Richard Mole.
It is? Okay.
Richard Mole, yeah. And... I'm for sure about this. I was wrong about Iron Man. But
I'm sorry. Yeah. Martin Mole was Clue. I apologize.
No, you're fine. I was wrong about Iron Man when we were talking about Iron Man. Shane Black did
Iron Man 3.
Direct Iron Man 3. So we're 1 for 1. But William Catt plays the lead, and you might know him from it's kind of a cult show, I guess, The Greatest American Hero. It's not one that I remember as a kid, but my wife loves it. She's every time we've ever watched House, she's like, it's the guy from It's the Greatest American Hero. So it's a movie that's built around all these TV actors, interesting, in kind of big shows from the 80s. It's a fun movie. Again, it doesn't really rely too heavily on scares. Ultimately, there's a mystery involved that goes into some strange flashback sequences. There's some fantasy dream flashback elements, but it's an 80s movie, so of course, that's totally acceptable. That was just a thing that happened in the 80s. You're going to have, especially in the horror genre, you're going to have some sort of weird fantasy or dream sequence or what have you. The special effects are pretty good, though. It's one, a lot of weird, cool practical effects. The monster in it is very strange and strange sounding. So, and also a really cool, the musical score composed by Harry Manfredini, who did almost all of the Friday the 13th movies. It's got an eerie, driving, piano-driven score. I really like it. It fits the movie very well. So if you haven't seen it, House 1985, check it out. It's pretty easily available on Amazon. Actually, I think you can watch it for free on YouTube as well.
I'm pretty sure I have it on a compilation that I was given of a couple different horror movies.
And I also want to add, it had one of the coolest posters of the horror movie posters of the 80s, where it had this sort of it was this rotting hand finger that was touching a doorbell, and the tagline was "Ding dong, you're dead."
Yeah.
I just thought that, I mean,
no,
it really has nothing to do that happens in the movie. You know what I mean? But it was just this very cool poster. I actually have the poster in my closet.
It's a creepy poster.
So your pick of the week was
Night of the Creeps.
Another. This is a solely written, directed by Fred Dekker, correct?
It's true.
And this is one, like you said. Well, I didn't. This is one I saw much later after Monster Squad.
Me too. And if there's one thing that Fred Dekker nails, it's how to write a super entertaining movie with the type of scares that are more fun, more so than they are completely terrifying. And 1986's Night of the Creeps is a total hodgepodge of almost everything that could be in a typical horror movie, but with a 1950s B horror movie vibe all throughout it. You've got, zombies, aliens, exploding heads, body snatching slugs, and basic kid flirtation while trying to battle said body snatching slug zombies. And even a detective in dire need of a therapist and looking to right the wrongs of his past. That part always makes me laugh. It's kind of the cheesiest part for me, but it's kind of needed for the movie. Now, Dekker did an amazing job, I think, creating this world where the past still feels like it haunts the present. And Night of the Creeps is thoughtfully executed visually and surprisingly somewhat deep on the plot as well. Not totally deep, but there's a little bit of history behind it. It's an 80s homage to cult and B horror movies of times gone by. There are plenty of scares, legit moments of holding your breath, waiting for something to be revealed from around the corner. But the jump scares in this movie differ from those that we've come to know in movies today. Like with Night of the Creeps, you can't guess what's going to be behind door number 1. But with movies today, we know it's probably going to be something bloody, gross. It may make you feel violated and have nightmares later on. But with this Dekker film, you're looking forward to what's behind that door. The next imaginative scare, whether it's going to be gross or not. You have no idea what it's going to be in this movie. It feels much more like the decade it was born into than Monster Squad, I feel like. And although both stories come from Dekker's mind, it's obvious that he knows how to write youngsters in scary situations while never losing the fun and thrilling, adventurous aspect of movie watching. This is a movie that's a perfect drive-in movie still. Just think of like, I don't know, you sitting in a convertible with your arm around your sweetheart, something like that. Total 1950s vibe, but you know what I mean. The slithering grossness and head-exploding special effects are campy by today's standards, but man, I'm such a sucker for these awesome visuals. And even though they look fake at times, like downright super fake at times, it really fits in with the campiness, thus making it all too perfect for this movie. Even though it's fake, I love it. The tagline for this movie still holds up, and I love it so much. The good news is your dates are here. Bad news is they're dead. Love it. I can safely say that this is a favorite horror light movie of mine, even though it took me years to own my own copy, but now after repeated viewings, it gets better and better each time I watch it. I'm glad you like it, Justin.
Yeah, and there's the last time I watched it, one thing I never noticed.
What's that?
Is that on the when one of the slugs is in the bathroom with the kid, on the bathroom stall, written in marker, it says the Monster Squad.
It says Go Monster Squad.
Go Monster Squad.
Yeah, it's really cute. I love that. If you love Monster Squad, like you've noticed it.
No, I think I actually got to catch fairly recently. They showed Night of the Creeps at midnight showing here in St. Louis.
It's such a great theater.
It's a good crowd pleaser.
Yeah, it's fun. It is what you think of like a great 80s like horror movie, but it's not horror in that you're gonna walk out and feel nauseous. It's like it's palatable for anyone that can like a movie, really. I feel like I just have so many friends that don't like scary movies or horror movies, and I feel
you need to find some new friends.
I know.
I'm just joking.
I just feel like so many times I'm like, no, you could actually sit through this one. It's totally fine. Night of the Creeps is one of those.
I think it's a good one. I
Yeah.
think that was a good pick.
I love House. Fred Dekker, man, we really like you on this podcast.
He also wrote the story to the movie Ricochet. I watched that not too long ago with
That's right.
Denzel Washington, a young Denzel Washington,
Yeah.
and a young John Lithgow,
Good.
and a young Ice-T.
Way to bring up that gem. Good job.
And it pretty thrilling. It's a good revisit.
Fred Dekker's got a great creative mind, and he's very talented and can pull off basically anything. He's got a good vision.
Yeah. Well, let's move on. It is time. Here is your Murray moment.
Chicks dig me because I rarely wear underwear, and when I do, it's usually something unusual.
I think I need a root canal. I'm sure I need a long, slow root canal.
You gonna come and shake my monkey tree again?
Oh, what does that old queen know? She didn't even show.
Hey, this is so scrumptious. Is this hand shut?
The flowing robes, the grace, all striking.
That was fun.
When Billy Murray was a kid, he wasn't much into monster hunting like the squad of kids that we've been talking about during this podcast. Nah, Billy and his brothers were pretty much working class kids who all caddied at the local Indian Hill Club in Winnetka, a golf course outside of Chicago. So this was probably in the 1960s, and also these were the times when, you did your caddying barefoot. And caddies weren't paid very well either, but you could make a little bit more money than the average kid. And in Billy's opinion, he thinks caddying is a job that every kid should do in their youth to learn some life lessons. The quiet, dew-filled early mornings and beautiful sunsets with nature chirping around was also an added perk. Billy loved that tranquility. Now, the Murray brothers did a lot of growing up pretty fast because of their caddying. And as caddies, they took care of some successful business women and men, their belongings, cheered on and encouraged these golfers to play well. That was their role. These Murray boys had to hang with the mature, sometimes very, socially important folk at an early age. And because of this, Billy believes that caddying is partially responsible for his good and solid work ethic, obviously something that can be seen through his professional body of work, films, and whatnot. And possibly just as important, maybe even a little more, Billy said that he learned a lot about people. You've got a lot of time to observe people and how they interact during 18 holes of golf. You see how people treat others who are their equals or who they consider their equals, and then also people who they consider or who they think are, quote, under them. Billy says that this helped shape how he treats people in his life and also helped him realize how he wants to be treated. Some of the golfers were kind and considerate, while others were downright rude and dismissive. I think Billy's feelings can be best communicated through the words of Peter Venkman in Ghostbusters. My friend, don't be a jerk. That's basically what he's trying to say. Another thing he figured out on the golf course, out in nature, out in the open, while still feeling somewhat private, this is when secrets come out. It turned out to be important in understanding human behavior. As Billy put it, the role of being a caddy is an all-around great life lesson. You show up, keep up, and shut up. Of course, there was one bad part of his job. There had to be one part. He was the shag boy, and this means Billy would go out and recover dead golf balls, but if he wasn't paying attention, he'd get beaned in the head. And even including being beaned in the head, I think caddying could most certainly be replaced with any job in the service industry. People can be treated like garbage. Even when you're not at work, people just sometimes treat other people like garbage. Not to go all moralistic here, but treating people with respect goes a long way. And being a caddy, being in the service industry, really gives you an insight as to how to treat folks. Now, it's up to you whether you choose to learn from those lessons or not. And if you don't believe me, listen to Billy. He's been around longer than me. I'm not saying that Billy Murray is a saint, but I've read enough examples about the dude to know that while he's very particular, he never wants trouble or anyone to be upset, just wants honesty and for people to be treated fairly and with respect. And all that stems from his childhood days as a caddy. I don't know. It's kind of like cute to think about he learned a lot about people at such an early age doing that job, because I could only imagine the type of crap he put up with.
I think that is true about working in the service industry. Sort of gives you an early lesson on how terrible people can be and how you don't want to treat people that way. Yeah.
And I think I wonder, I would want to ask Bill Murray if that's kind of, a lot of people have experienced him that have met him, of him just being real and just relating to people like any other person and not really acting like a celebrity. Now of course, I'm sure there are other stories too, but I wonder if having that background really has something to do with him being able to relate to basically, the everyday man, someone in the service industry that's like, I'm not going to treat somebody in a subservient way,
right?
Because that's what they used to do.
And I think I'm sure every celebrity has their bad day.
Totally,
you're totally,
completely
not in a good mood, and you get people hounding you for whatever. But I think that if you're a celebrity that comes out of working in some sort of service industry job before you get your big break, he probably gives you a little bit of perspective.
And I think when you're working as a caddy, there might be a particular class of folks that you deal with that maybe like everybody in the service industry doesn't necessarily deal with that particular type of class.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like you might have a different understanding and a different view of how people are treated. And I think like in this specific case, I bet that Billy and his brothers learned a few things, which maybe keeps them a little bit maybe more grounded. I don't know.
Well, thanks for that Murray moment.
Of course.
It was good. I like hearing early stories of actors.
Yeah, sometimes
like
they're
before
hard.
They were.
They're hard to dig up a little bit on Billy.
It's interesting that you brought up that particular, because I for real honest to you listeners, I never know what Lindsay's going to
It's true, but
say for the Murray moment.
Before we recorded, we were talking about Caddyshack.
Before we recorded, like literally before you came over, I was listening to this documentary about Caddyshack, and they were talking in the documentary. They talked about how all the Murray brothers worked at that country club and how they pulled all the ideas from Caddyshack. A lot of that came from their experiences.
Yeah.
So it was like very odd.
I know.
As soon as you started telling this story, I was like, man.
As soon as you started talking about that earlier, I was like, did I tell him that I was going to be talking about? I don't think I did.
We're just on that.
I know.
Path.
We've reached that point actually.
Yeah. In our friendship podcast ship.
I'm good with that. I feel really good about that actually.
Yeah. Okay. Well, got kind of like a big outro here because there's a lot of stuff to talk about.
We do.
So first off, as always, thank you, listeners.
Sticking around to the end.
Yeah, sticking
thank
around. I'm very excited. So like,
I know we both are.
We are 11 episodes in, and the idea of doing this podcast has always been like, a discussion show. But a great opportunity came along to do an interview, and so. And I hope we get more opportunities to do more interviews on this podcast in the future. But we're very thankful, very lucky to interview Andre Gower, star of Monster Squad, his current producing partner, Henry McComas. Together, they made a feature-length documentary about the making of the Monster Squad, the production, all the way down to the legacy and its growing fan base, and hopefully future fan base.
And really, like, not just as a quick aside, not just because we love Monster Squad, like it is a very well done documentary, and I'm so glad that it's out there, and I really hope it does well. It's so good.
So we'll be so next week we're gonna have a special, because this is bi-weekly, but we're gonna have a special next week episode,
bonus episode,
where we interview Henry and Andre, and then it'll mostly just be the interview, and we'll plug the Monster Squad documentary, which is doing some special screenings, but mainly just film festivals. But if we find out any information, we'll plug that on our Instagram page. So look for that.
Okay.
And so the week after the interview, we're also going to have
kind of a big deal,
sort of another special episode. It's the week of Bill Murray's birthday, and to celebrate, we're doing an all Bill Murray podcast. But our main movie of focus will be Quick Change, which is one of my favorite Bill Murray movies. Is it one of your favorite?
Yeah, it's one I've seen a million times, but it is one that I feel gets shadowed a lot.
It's definitely, I think, an undermentioned.
But you've
Bill
got
Murray movie,
Gina Davis and Randy Quaid.
Yeah,
it's not like a
Jason Robards.
Yeah, this is not a movie that should have been shrouded or anything. I mean, they definitely made the talk show circuit and everything about this movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this one.
So we'll be doing that, and so we got a lot of good comments on Stand By Me. We got some comments on RoboCop. So those are sort of bigger movies that we did. And we've had some suggestions on doing some bigger, well-known movies. So that's something we might, teeter with.
Yeah, we kind of there are so many movies out there in the world to talk about. And a lot of things that Justin and I like together and agree upon. That would make for a good podcast. And then sometimes we just figure, what's a movie out there that people know that's going to grab you and be like, oh my gosh, yeah, that movie. I love that movie. So we kind of toggle between this feeling of like wanting to, choose a movie that maybe that Bill Murray movie that you've never seen, and a movie that you totally know and haven't seen in a long time. So it's this delicate balance of choosing a somewhere in that gray area, because we don't want to alienate anybody by choosing a completely obscure movie, and we also are not going to talk about Jaws.
Right. So but I think we'll lean toward some more well-known movies.
So we're going to do Star Wars next week? Great. Yeah. Star Wars it is.
Yeah. I'll wear my Yoda ears.
Yeah, perfect. I've got my Princess Leia buns right in my car, actually, always.
So next week you got the interview, our first interview with Andre Gower and Henry McComas, and then a week after that we've got Quick Change, our special Bill Murray episode. So again, thank you for listening. You can always find us on Facebook, Don't Push Pause Podcast. We're really active on Instagram. That seems to be our favorite social media outlet, and we're there, Don't Push Pause Podcast. You can go to our website, don'tpushpausepodcast.com, or you can always contact us directly, which we always love hearing from people, at don'tpushpausepodcast@gmail.com. And was there any final thoughts you had about Monster Squad? Anything you want to say before we close it out?
Oh, man. I think I mentioned it a little bit, but this movie does contain my favorite musical montage. And if you do nothing else, if you don't seek out Monster Squad, if it's been a long time since you've seen it, just go straight to YouTube right now and look up Monster Squad Montage or Rock Until You Drop. Just look it up right now, because I guarantee it's going to make your day. It's made my day numerous times in life. And
I like that you wore your Stephen King Rules t-shirt for the podcast
tonight. I most certainly did.
I didn't think that you wouldn't not wear it.
Duh. I'm surprised you didn't wear your Monster Squad hat.
Yeah.
You did during the interview. Ooh.
Oh. Yeah. That's because it's hot down here, because we have the AC up.
Do you have a final Monster Squad thought?
Yeah, I guess I got kind of two thoughts here. One being first, this is something that we didn't mention. We had talked about it, but didn't mention earlier, and failed to mention it during when I was, recommending this as a family film. Do think this is a very festive and family appropriate Halloween holiday movie, but just like many 80s movies, Heathers, Bill and Ted, like Weird Science, we mentioned this on our Weird Science episode. During the 80s, there are a lot of these movies now, you watch them now, and there's those cringeworthy moments of either coming off homophobic or racist, and certainly Monster Squad has a couple of those cringeworthy moments. So those of you who are familiar with the movie, I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about, and those of you who are not, maybe it is something that you might want to investigate before you show it to your family. I guess my final thought on the Monster Squad is, when we were first starting out this podcast, I went over to your house and we practiced with this movie just to see what our rapport would be, because we didn't really know each other that well. And then we got a big old Monster Squad poster hanging in our studio here.
We do. It is really what brought us together.
So this makes it and we're almost
it's like a year in.
A year since we met up and started talking about doing this thing. So yeah, I guess that's my final thought on it.
It's kind of a big deal. Yeah. And thank you so much for sticking with us and making it, to what episode are we on now?
11.
11? Yeah. Thank you for sticking with us, and it's only gonna get better from here on out.
I hope.
I mean,
yeah. Why wouldn't it?
Yeah.
All right. Well, until next time, I'm Justin Johnson.
I'm Lindsay Raper.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.